All right, good afternoon. I'm Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri, and we're here to talk about the incident that occurred yesterday in Palm Harbor. I'm going to set the stage by beginning chronologically with what we know happened that led up to the tragic events of yesterday morning. Last Thursday, August 3rd, at about 1 o'clock a.m., someone broke into the Platinum Plus Auto Sales at 1361 South Missouri Avenue in Clearwater. They broke a window to the business and took 5 sets of car keys, and they used the car keys to steal 2 cars from the lot. One is a 2015 black Ford Explorer, and the other a 2008 Chrysler Sebring. According to Keandre Brown, who is one of the juveniles involved in this, Dion Kegler is the one who was responsible for stealing the cars, but it's unknown who was with Kegler at the time he supposedly stole the cars from the lot. From the suspect's statements and other investigative means, we know generally about how these kids operate, and that the cars are stolen and stashed in public areas like apartment complex parking lots until they are found by law enforcement, they're abandoned, or in this case, they crash. So what happened here is about 1 a.m. yesterday morning, a Pinellas County Sheriff's Office deputy saw the black Explorer in the parking lot of a gas station at State Road 580 and Main Street in Dunedin. The deputy recognized the vehicle as being stolen because it was on a hot list that is daily distributed to deputies for vehicles to be on the lookout for. The deputy attempted to stop the vehicle, but it immediately fled, and the deputy didn't pursue the car, which is consistent with our policy. We know from statements made by 14-year-old Keandre Brown that he was in the Explorer at the time the deputy tried to stop it, and the other occupants of the car were Keontae Brown, who is his brother, and Keontae was driving, Jimmy Goshi, and Dejari Thomas. We don't know what the 4 kids did between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock a.m., but we do know, based on statements made by Dion Kegler and Keandre, that the 4 arrived at Kegler's house at about 2 o'clock a.m. yesterday morning. From Kegler's house, Kegler, Keontae Brown, and the others went to the parking lot of a nearby apartment complex, which, like I said, is consistent with where these kids stash the cars so they have them at their disposal after they steal them. And it was in that apartment complex parking lot that Kegler gave the keys to a 2008 Sebring, which is the car that's in the board down here on my right, your left. He gave him the keys of the car, and then an argument ensued between Kegler and Dejari Thomas, because Thomas wanted Kegler to ride in the Ford and he wanted to ride in the Sebring, because according to Kegler, he, quote, likes to ride, which means he likes to drive. He just likes to drive around. According to Kegler, Thomas pulled a handgun from his waistband, cocked the hammer, and put it to Kegler's head, telling him that he would ride in the Explorer. Kegler stated that Thomas eventually put the gun away and agreed to let him drive the Sebring. They then went to Kamal Campbell's residence. They stayed there for a short time while all 6 of them smoked marijuana. After they left Campbell's residence in both of the stolen cars, the Ford Explorer and the Sebring, they went to a Wawa store on South Missouri Avenue in Clearwater. They gassed up both of the cars there, and we have video from the store showing they were at the store at 2:19 a.m. yesterday morning. They then went to Safety Harbor for the purpose of committing vehicle burglaries in residential areas. According to Kegler, Campbell, and Keandre Brown, they did what I refer to as the usual, and that is that one person drives down the street, the others jump out of the car, and they try every door handle they can find, and when they find unlocked cars, they steal whatever they can out of it. This is the usual and the method that they've used for years, last couple years, that we've seen all the time. In fact, during this episode, at one point, one of them described that they were going down the neighborhood street. They put the car in neutral and just let it push down the street by itself, and they all jumped out to try door handles so they could get as much as they could out of the cars, which will maximize their assets, I guess. And they're doing this while the cars are all blacked out. And they were in Safety Harbor for a period of time. And the three admitted that they did commit several vehicle burglaries in Safety Harbor. They then saw the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office helicopter overhead. They became concerned about the helicopter and thought it might be time to leave Safety Harbor. But after a few orbits of the helicopter, it moved on to other areas. The helicopter was likely up there just on routine patrol. They thought that the helicopter was there looking for them, and it wasn't at that point, but they became concerned about it. But when the helicopter left, they decided to stay in Safety Harbor and continued their criminal activity in trying to burglarize more cars. At some point, they left Safety Harbor and decided to go up to East Lake Woodlands and commit more vehicle burglaries in East Lake Woodlands. We know they arrived at East Lake Woodlands at the entrance off of East Lake Road, north of the Target, north of the Boot Ranch area. And we know that because a Pinellas County Sheriff's deputy saw them at 4 o'clock in the morning with the Sebring and the Ford Explorer entering into East Lake Woodlands. At that point, several deputies went to the area. They set up a perimeter, basically locked down East Lake Woodlands, and the helicopter was up overhead, and this time the helicopter was looking for them. However, they didn't have any success in finding them. But from what we know, based on statements afterward, the helicopter being there caused them to flee East Lake Woodlands. So they were there committing the vehicle burglaries. They did commit several vehicle burglaries in East Lake Woodlands. They saw the helicopter a second time and decided that it's time to go, and that's when they fled from East Lake Woodlands. At about 4:30 a.m., another deputy who had been on the perimeter established around East Lake Woodlands saw both the Sebring and the Ford Explorer southbound on the exit ramp for Tampa Road off of East Lake Road or McMullen Booth Road. It's all the same at that location. The deputy was behind both of the vehicles as it went westbound on Tampa Road, and he did not activate his emergency lights. According to the deputy, the cars appeared to be playing a cat and mouse game. He was behind the Sebring and the Ford Explorer, and the Explorer then accelerated around the Sebring, slowing down to the point where the deputy thought the Sebring was going to run into the back of the Explorer. So as they were going down the road, they were accelerating, slowing down, going around each other. The cars continued westbound on Tampa Road, and the Sebring slowed considerably in the area of Lake St. George Boulevard. At that point, the Explorer, while the Sebring slowed, accelerated at a high rate of speed. And as it continued westbound, the deputy became in a situation where he was in front of the Sebring but still behind the Explorer, and he was not pursuing the Explorer. The deputy made a U-turn on Tampa Road and was heading back eastbound. So if you look at the diagram that we have here, deputy sees them as they come off of McMullen Booth back here. We get to Lake St. George, and between Lake St. George and US 19 is where the deputy made a U-turn. So the deputy had turned off and was heading back eastbound when the Explorer continued westbound. When the Explorer got to the intersection of US 19 and Tampa Road, it had a red light. And based upon statements made by Keandre Brown, who is the 14-year-old that was in the Explorer, as it approached the intersection of Tampa Road and US 19, the Explorer was traveling at between 120 and 140 miles an hour. He said that they slowed slightly, and the vehicle, which was being driven by his brother, Keandre Brown, went through the intersection when he had a red light at over 100 miles an hour. Additionally, while the vehicle was on Tampa Road, Keandre Brown had turned off all of the lights, so the vehicle was blacked out. Ricky Melendez was driving his 1999 Toyota Camry northbound on US 19 in the middle lane going to work. He had a green light for going northbound on 19 at Tampa Road. When Melendez entered the middle of the intersection, the Ford Explorer at 100 miles an hour plus blacked out, went through the red light, and struck Melendez's vehicle, pushing it northbound into the southbound lanes of US 19. At that point, the Explorer went airborne It struck at least 5 cars that were parked in the parking lot of the automobile dealership on the northwest corner of US 19 and Tampa Road. There's a huge billboard with a big pole, huge, sitting in the lot of the automobile dealership. So after it hit the 5 cars, airborne is that it hit that pole at about 10 feet high in the air. It careened off the pole, hit another couple of cars in the parking lot, and then tumbled down Tampa Road, where it caught fire in the middle of the road and came to a stop. Keontae Brown, as I said, was the driver. He was ejected and he died on the roadway. Jimmy Goshi and Jajari Thomas died in the car and they were trapped by the wreckage. Keandre Brown, the 14-year-old, was also ejected and, as it turns out, received minor injuries. Keandre told us that he was seated in the back on the passenger side and was ejected through the front windshield. There is no doubt from those of you that are out there or have seen it that this was a very, very violent wreck, and the amount of force was phenomenal. And according to him, he was seated in the back seat. The amount of force ejected him through the windshield, and the last thing he remembered was just laying in the middle of the road covered in glass. Thomas was the front passenger and Goshi was seated in the rear behind the driver. After the crash, deputies arrived on the scene. They attempted to extinguish the fire. We're going to show you a video of that. But due to the severity of the wreckage, they were not able to remove Goshi or Thomas from the car. The fire department, emergency medical services responded, treated Keandre Brown. He was transported to Bayfront and then All Children's Hospital, and it was determined that he received only a concussion. He was released from the hospital this morning, charged with grand theft auto, and booked into the Pinellas Juvenile Assessment Center. At the time Thomas was removed from the crash and from the Explorer, he still had gloves on his hands from committing the burglaries. So as these kids were out there and gloved up, and I saw them, and these are the gloves. These are the photos of the actual gloves that Jajari Thomas had on his hands when he died in the back of that Explorer from doing the burglaries. We also found other gloves on the roadway, and they fled so quickly from the scene, from Eastlake Woodlands, and they were going so fast that they didn't even take their gloves off. After the Explorer fled, crashed as I've described to you, the Sebring continued westbound the road, and its speed was normal traffic. It really hadn't accelerated. And when it hit US 19, though, it accelerated and it ran the red light at US 19 going southbound. Deputies did not pursue the Sebring, but it was being surveilled by our helicopter. Kegler was driving the Sebring, and it was trying to elude the helicopter by driving throughout Dunedin and North Clearwater. Near the intersection of Sunset Point Road and Keene Road, Kegler and Campbell stopped and bailed from the car. Deputies arrived shortly thereafter along with K9, and after a brief foot chase, both were apprehended. Kegler was still wearing one glove when he was caught. So again, in that car as well, they had gloves which they were wearing to commit these burglaries. Kegler and Campbell dropped a backpack containing some jewelry and other items believed to have been taken in the burglaries. They also are believed to have tossed some items from the car while fleeing from the helicopter. Brown, Kegler, and Campbell all admit to knowing that the cars were stolen, that all of the kids knew the cars were stolen, and their whole purpose in being in Safety Harbor in Eastlake was simply to break into cars and steal people's stuff. So at this point, we have 3 videos that we're going to play for you, I hope. And the first one is video from the Thornton's gas station, which is on the southwest corner of Tampa Road and 19. The next one is from the Ferrari dealership, which is a little bit further to the west. And then the third one, which has audio, is the dash camera of the deputy who was first on the scene who tried to extinguish the flames. So we'll go ahead and play the videos for you, and then we'll continue. The next one shows the deputy, and he's coming from the west to the east. He's coming off of Belcher. He'll be going eastbound on Tampa Road. That's him showing up. And the next thing you'll see is from the dash cam in his cruiser, and that starts now. That time is wrong. The time on his camera was wrong. This is at 4:30, not 5:03. So again, in the car you saw there was Jimmy Goshi and Dejari Thomas. Keontae Brown, who was the driver and was ejected and was deceased in the roadway, he would have been on the other side or to the east of the car itself. And Keandre Brown, the 14-year-old, he was also ejected, the one through the windshield. He was also further east. So they were both ejected before the car came to. They were both ejected before the car came to a rest where it was. I want to talk a little bit about these kids and their histories and what led up to yesterday morning. So all of these kids, all of them here, they all range in age from 14 to 18. And Kamal Campbell, as you can see, he just turned 18 last October. So he is barely an adult. Between these 6 kids, these 6 juveniles, who range in age from 14 to 18, they've been arrested 126 times among them. 19 of their 126 arrests have been for grand theft, stealing cars. They've also been arrested for violent and other serious crimes, such as aggravated assault with a weapon, firing a weapon in public, burglary of an occupied dwelling, fleeing and eluding, armed burglary, and robbery with a gun. 39 of their 126 arrests have been for violating probation. That means they're non-compliant with these non-jail sanctions for their criminal acts. When kids in Pinellas County get arrested, they go to the PJAC Center, as we call it, or the Pinellas Juvenile Assessment Center. It's an initial booking place, and they're held there for a period of time. It's kind of like the booking desk at the county jail. Once they're moved from the PJAC Center, if they're held in detention, they go over to the Juvenile Detention Center. And all of these kids have been jailed at the Juvenile Detention Center 43 times, with several of them being released only a few days before this incident. Keandre Brown was released from the Juvenile Detention Center on August 2nd. Keontae Brown, released from the Juvenile Detention Center on July 31st. Dejari Thomas, released from the Juvenile Detention Center on July 28th. Deon Kegler was last released from the Juvenile Detention Center on July 12th. And Jimmy Goshi was last released in May of 2017, just a couple months ago. In addition to 43 Juvenile Detention Center incarcerations, these kids have been placed on many different sanctions, including home detention and electronic monitoring. The problem is that these kids could have cared less about their crimes. They had no concern whatsoever about the juvenile justice system. It simply comes down to this: when there's no consequence, there's no fear of consequence. And there's no fear of consequence, you end up with kids 14, 15, 16 years old that get arrested 126 times, 43 times in the juvenile detention center, multiple arrests for violent crimes and auto thefts. And they just totally could have cared less. And to illustrate this, just a little bit about their cavalier attitude and their I could care less, and I really don't care about what the criminal justice system and juvenile justice system says. This is Jimmy Goshi, 14 years old. And this is his Facebook posts. And we'll give you copies of this. That's a gun. And the gun is pointing at whoever's looking at this on Facebook. And he says here, who got some perp? That's marijuana. It's slang term for marijuana. So he's looking for marijuana, and he's putting a picture up as he's looking for marijuana with a gun pointed at whoever's reading it. At the same time, he's flashing money in his hand. He's got somebody else flashing money. Over here, they're flashing gang signs. And same thing in that photo. And guess what they have behind him? 2 brand new cars. He's 14 years old. He didn't buy that car. Those are just more stolen cars. The date of these things, July 14th, a couple weeks ago. Dejari Thomas, this is the guy who took out the gun and cocked it and put it to Kegler's head. Dejari Thomas, this is on here from July 10th, posted on Facebook. I mean, I steal cars, but damn, y'all ain't taking it too far. Y'all taking it too far. Then he says the crackers want to direct file me, but it ain't gonna happen. He's talking about being direct filed as an adult and charged as an adult for all of these offenses. Then he's got here, UK, I'm a hot whatever. He's got a picture of himself being chased by a police car. But ain't never gonna lose my cool. So that's why these kids don't care. And then you got pictures of him up here too, flashing a whole bunch of cash. Again, look at that car he's sitting on. And that was posted July 8th, 2017, sitting on a hood of a BMW. 16 years old, he didn't have a BMW, stealing more cars. They don't care. If they cared, they wouldn't be posting this stuff the way they were. Again, the juvenile justice system is not working. There's not enough consequence, and when there's not enough consequence, there's no fear of consequence. You got kids who are between 14 and 18 years old getting arrested 126 times, spending 43 different occasions in the juvenile detention center, posting things on Facebook saying it ain't gonna happen, the crackers aren't gonna put me in a direct file, flashing gang signs, sitting with BMWs and Nissans and other new cars that they've stolen, and they don't care because it doesn't matter to them. It's a revolving door. Needless to say, this entire situation is very frustrating because, again, 3 young lives have been needlessly lost. It's frustrating because it's an epidemic of what has been and continues to occur in Pinellas County. This is something that the county's been plagued by for a couple of years. They steal cars, they engage in other criminal activity like armed robbery, drug dealing, dump the cars, and just wait for the chase game to occur. We've done a lot here in Pinellas County. The law enforcement has stepped up and tried to do all that we can to address this problem, but it's obviously not enough. We have a violent crime task force combined of the St. Petersburg Police Department, Clearwater Police Department, the Sheriff's Office. We're out every night trying to apprehend these kids as they steal these cars. We have a habitual offender monitoring enforcement program where numerous agencies are participating, and we're providing pretty much 20-hour a day, I guess, and 7-day-a-week supervision to about 200 kids throughout the county because the Department of Juvenile Justice is unable to intensively supervise them with their current staffing levels. We've also invested in electronic monitoring that the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office is paying for because, again, DJJ is underfunded and they can't provide that level of electronic monitoring. We've added home case managers to try and engage the families, to try and get them involved in services. And last year, we formed a working group of elected officials, community leaders, juvenile justice system providers to identify gaps and opportunities to help reduce this high level of recidivism. Now, that resulted in a bill that the legislature passed this session. It's called the Prolific Juvenile Offender Bill. And while it is a step in the right direction, only 2 of these kids would fit within the definition of a prolific juvenile offender under that bill. And the reality of it is it probably wouldn't have done any good because it would have kept them in JDC on the front end, pre-adjudication, and they probably would have just got out on electronic monitoring and done what they did here. Now, despite all of these efforts, unfortunately, auto thefts are up in Pinellas County for the first half of 2017. For the first 6 months of 2016, there were 1,064 auto thefts in Pinellas County, and so far this year, for the first 6 months, there were 1,124. Now, there is good news in that the number overall was down from 2015 and 16, but it's, again, back up again in 17. This has got to change. Law enforcement can't fix this. Parents, family members, caregivers, others need to step up and figure out why these kids are out at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning stealing cars. We're doing all we can, and we're working hard at it. But we need help, and the community needs to step up, and something has got to be done and done differently because having 6 teens, 3 now dead, again, who between them were arrested 126 times, 19 of which were for auto theft, who've been incarcerated a combined 43 times at JDC, tells us we have a serious problem and something else needs to happen. So Kegler, Campbell, and Brown have all been charged with grand theft auto. and the investigation is continuing as we consider additional charges. One of the things we're looking at, it's a very serious crime, it's a very serious charge, and if we can establish the probable cause to do it, their offenses may fit under the felony murder rule for first-degree murder, and we're looking at it. And if we can establish the elements of the offense, we're going to charge them with first-degree murder under the felony murder rule, because something has to be done differently. We've reached out to the community in an effort to identify car burglary victims from Saturday night and into Sunday morning. We absolutely need anybody in the Clearwater, Safety Harbor, East Lake area. There was a victim of a car burglary. Somebody broke into their car or went into their car because they left their car unlocked. Saturday night into Sunday morning in those areas to contact us and report it. It's essential that we identify as many victims as we possibly can. We did a phone call last night, and it was a robo-type call that went out to that area. We got some information from people. They thought it might have been a prank. It's not a prank, it's us. And if anybody is a victim where somebody went into their car and merely took change or opened the car door or whatever it is, please call the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, because we need to take a report on that. We need to identify as many victims as we can. So with that, I'll take any questions that you have.
Sheriff, were these teenagers all a part of the home program, or at one time had been a part of your home program?
Yes.
All 6 of them?
I believe all of them were at one time or another. And all of them have either been on what we call radar or intensive supervision in some aspect of it. And they've been the subjects of extensive house checks and extensive monitoring. All of them at one time or another were somewhere under supervision.
So my follow-up is, and I could tell you expressed some frustration in the system of letting these kids out earlier or not doing enough. With your own home program, which has other agencies involved, is there more that can be done or improved upon in this program that could have done anything different with these guys?
No, we can't babysit them. We're going out there sometimes for these kids once a day, sometimes twice a day. We get out there as much as we can, but we're not their parents. And we go to the house and we check on them and make sure that they are where they're supposed to be. These officers and these deputies care about these kids. They try and spend time with them. They're trying to get the families involved in services, trying to get the kids on the right track, but they're not our kids. And somebody needs to own these kids, and somebody needs to take responsibility for them. And we can't do it. We're looking at right now in home that we monitor in one way or another around 200 kids. And we're spending a lot of time and a lot of resources because we want to do it. And we want to make a difference. But unless we're going to move into the house and hold their hand 24/7, there's nothing more we can do.
Sheriff, the auto task force that you started, how do you think it's doing so far?
It's doing great. I mean, the Violent Crime Task Force and combating auto thefts, they do a fabulous job, a tremendous job, but they're going after those that are out there already doing it. We're never going to solve this problem by arresting these kids, as it shows. They get arrested 126 times, and all these times in JDC. And some of it is that you got a small group, and this is not the big pot of kids. The big pot of kids out there are doing the right thing. You got a smaller subset that have problems, have bumps in the road, and then yet the smaller subset is this group that's wreaking havoc out there. But the system is not providing enough consequences for these kids. And the Auto Theft Task Force that's out there is making arrests every single night. This scenario repeats itself daily in Pinellas County. Every single day this has happened. The only difference between Sunday night and Saturday night and Sunday night and Friday night and Sunday night and Thursday night, the only difference is that they wrecked and are dead. But this is playing out every single day. They're running around out there, driving fast, running red lights, wreaking havoc, stealing as much as they can steal, go back the next night and do it all over again, because it's a game to them, but it's a deadly game. And so it doesn't matter to them. But the Violent Crime Task Force is doing a phenomenal job, and they're making arrests every single night. It's containing it, and that's why the numbers are down a little bit from 16 compared to 15, but it's not solving it.
Sure. I have several questions. What's the speed limit in the area at which they crashed?
We can get that for you to be sure. I want to say out there in Tampa Road, it's probably 45.
And I noticed the glove that says Jimmy Goshi there, but you had mentioned Dejari Thomas. Just a point of clarification, who had the glove on them at the time? So we'll have to clarify that for you. Okay, we'll clarify that. And so
thought it was Thomas, but if it does say Goshi on there, we'll have to get that clarified.
Yeah, no problem. I'm starting with the quicker ones. And so the felony murder charge, obviously that's something that you guys are exploring. Can you give a little bit more elaboration on what exactly felony murder entails and what the threshold is for that?
Right, so the gist of it is that if you're committing one of the felonies that's listed, that's enumerated in the felony murder statute, and in the course of perpetrating that felony, somebody is killed, then you're responsible for it. That's the gist of it. So in this case, there's a couple of these offenses that are listed specifically in the felony murder statute, and burglary is one of them. Grand theft could be not under the first-degree felony murder, but under the third-degree felony murder. So there's various levels of felony murder, but burglary is one that is specifically listed in the first-degree felony murder statute. The grand theft would be under the third-degree felony murder. So if you're committing a felony, and as a result of perpetrating that felony, somebody dies, then you're responsible for it as a murder charge.
So Deon Kegler is, by Keandre's statement, responsible for taking these cars. Is that felony murder statute on the table only for him or for all of the boys?
It's being looked at for all three of the living kids.
Okay. In terms of the kids who were ejected and the kids who were not ejected, do you have any indication of who or who was not wearing seatbelts?
Best we know, nobody was wearing a seatbelt.
And the Ford Explorer, we had heard some mention from the original auto theft reports that may have had some sort of interceptor package. Was that formerly a police car?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was. I mean, kind of ironically is that it is what they call a Ford Explorer Interceptor. It's black, had a spotlight on it, and was a police package vehicle that was on the car lot up there in Clearwater.
And so was that previously used as a police vehicle? Or
Actually, it was on consignment. There's an owner to it, and so it's on consignment from whoever owned it to that car lot. And that's something that they'd have to tell you, but I know it was on consignment. I know it is an interceptor package. I know it had a spotlight on it. Whether it was actually used as a police car, I don't know.
Okay.
Sheriff, were any of these high-profile units working that night, whether you're anti-tech, anti-theft task force or Omega or some of these street crime units, or was it all handled by patrol?
This was handled by patrol. They weren't in the area up there on Saturday night into Sunday morning.
What rescue efforts were taken to remove the kids from the car? I mean, we saw from that video, the initial deputy had a fire extinguisher out, where there's something like the job light brought in, or? Yeah, afterward they had to cut them out after the kids were, well deceased. I mean, they were deceased in there when the deputies first arrived, you could tell. And there was no way for the deputies to go in there. That was an absolute tangled, the bodies were intact. Yeah. And it was an absolute mess. You couldn't get in there. You couldn't pull them out if you wanted to because of how everything, just the violence and the way you can see from the car. You couldn't even, at first, when I first got there, you couldn't even tell it was a car. But there was no way to get them out of there. And so when that deputy was there with the fire extinguisher, were the boys talking at all? Were they dead on arrival? No. And Keandre, did he try to run? No, he was moving on the ground. But no, he didn't try and run. There was no way. He was, at first, Washington, that's why he was a trauma alert and sent to Bayfront. They thought he was hurt very seriously and would have coming out of that wreck, but no. And the Sebring, would the kids in the Sebring have been, from the evidence that you've seen, able to witness the crash of the Explorer? They said they did. And what they saw was they didn't witness the crash itself, so I'll be clear with that. What they saw was the fireball. And when they approached the intersection of Tampa and 19, they knew something was wrong. And Kegler and Campbell got into some type of a verbal discussion about whether they should flee or whether they should turn around, and they decided to flee. But they knew it was bad. They knew that something was seriously wrong. They saw the fireball and fled. And then the auto thefts the initial auto thefts, I know you said that there's evidence Kegler was involved in those. Do you have another suspect of someone who was with him or multiple suspects? No, and no is the answer to that. And that initial report was taken by the Clearwater Police Department. It was in the city of Clearwater, but all we know is what I told you. And there had to be more than one person there, obviously, because they took two cars. Now, they took 5 sets of keys, but they only took the 2 cars. And there had to be at least 2 people there. And did the
kids say why they chose the places they were in that night for burglaries?
No, it's just random. They don't know or care. They just do it, and they just go wherever. They didn't even know where they were. They knew they were someplace in the Safety Harbor area and someplace up in the East Lake area, and they don't know the area at all.
Sheriff, St. Pete obviously started their task force a couple years ago. The numbers have dropped dramatically. Do you think because of that, these people have kind of gone to the county?
Well, we've seen that. We've seen that. Well, now, be clear with that. That's not the St. Pete Task Force. That's Sheriff's Office, St. Pete, and Clearwater. We have a lieutenant, a sergeant, and 5 deputies there. Clearwater has a sergeant and 5 officers. Clearwater, and St. Pete does, and Clearwater participates. So that's a countywide violent crime task force. And we have seen some squeezing of the balloon with this. That auto thefts have been down in St. Petersburg and up other places of the county. We've seen that. We saw it significantly during one portion of last year where they were down significantly in St. Pete and up like 80% in Pinellas Park. So, and they were up in Palm Harbor. So the bottom line of this is this is a countywide problem. This is not a problem that is unique to any particular city or any location within the county. And what we know from the numbers in 2017 is we're up over 2016. And yes, the balloon does get squeezed. And yes, the Violent Crime Task Force does spend a lot of time in St. Pete, but they also spend time in Clearwater and they spend time in other parts of the county. But there is a displacing effect depending upon where they're working and where they're concentrating.
Looks like from that photo, the Sebring was not spike stripped, the kids just abandoned it.
No, they abandoned it and fled. Yeah, go ahead.
How many cars they burglarized that night?
No idea. But, they're going down the street. And so how they do it is they get to a street, they turn off the lights, everybody other than the driver, and in one case they said the driver even got out because they put it in neutral and just let it coast. Everybody goes down the street and just starts pulling door handles. And if they pull the door handles and they find whatever it is they want to take, they take it and they just keep going until they get to the end of the street, they hop in and do the next one. Or they see somebody coming and then they flee.